Welcome, class. I'm Joseph, your instructor. Welcome to week 3 in the life of Jesus. I just wanted to introduce the overarching, I don't know what I might call it, the thesis or the arc of the class, the moral of the story, if you will. The book you're reading by N.T. Wright is very difficult, and I know it is. So I encourage you just to persist and keep reading. But the one thing I will say that will perhaps give you a sort of hermeneutical lens or a framework in which to understand it is that N.T. Wright is a historian, and he's trying to place Jesus in his historical context, which is first century Palestine, and it's Jewish, the context. Jesus is speaking mostly to Jews and religious leaders, so for what he says, it has to be intelligible to first century Jews. It has to make sense to them. His audience has to understand what he's saying, or else anything he says is going to make no sense, right? And he's not going to be the person he was if he's making no sense. So that's the basic thrust of the class, is let's understand Jesus in his first century historical Palestinian context. And imagine yourself, if we can draw an analogy for a moment. Imagine yourself if you wrote some diaries in Springfield, Missouri, and somebody 500 years from now found them. To understand what you're saying, they would have to contextualize you in Springfield, Missouri 500 years ago, would they not? If you made a reference to the Kansas City Royals winning the World Series in 2015, which congratulations to them, right? They would need to understand what that meant. They would have to understand what baseball meant in 2015. They'd have to understand Kansas City was a small market team that spent very little money, and their win was sort of against all odds, etc. And they'd have to understand you're from Missouri and what that means, or you're from the Midwest and what that means, etc. So historical context is simply about making more intelligible the person or the set of figures you're studying, and that's what N.T. Wright is doing. Now, N.T. Wright is not afraid of making theological judgments about whether Jesus is the Son of God or the Messiah. We'll get to those later, but he just says you can't understand those statements unless you first contextualize them. Then you can deduce a larger theological meaning from them. So I'll leave you with that as you continue to read in week 3, and I hope we can all be more active on the discussion board. Thank you so much.